Welcome to The Explainer. We're jumping right in today because we are exploring a concept that is just absolutely beautiful. We're talking about having a totally unmediated, direct relationship with the divine. I want you to imagine a spiritual framework where there is literally no red tape, no wait times, and absolutely no clerical hierarchy standing between you and the creator of the universe. It's an incredibly empowering idea. So today, we're going to break down exactly how Islamic teachings are carefully designed to protect this direct, unfiltered connection to God. Let's get into it.
Now, have you ever felt like you needed a middleman to reach God? It's a completely natural human instinct, right? Across basically all of human history and in so many different cultures, when we feel overwhelmed or, maybe a little unworthy, we instinctively want to seek out a saint, a holy person, or a revered ancestor to just pass our prayers along for us. We kind of think, well, maybe God will listen to them more than he'll listen to me. Like I said, it's a very natural vulnerability. But what if that instinct, as comforting as it might feel in the moment, is actually selling your own spiritual worth incredibly short? The source material offers a really profound alternative perspective here. It points out that the very people or the spiritual figures we might be tempted to call upon as middlemen, even the most revered saints or angels, are themselves just fellow seekers of the divine. They're looking for God's mercy just like you are. When you think about it, why ask a fellow passenger for a favor when the captain's door is standing wide open for you?
To really understand this, we need to look at a foundational concept called Tawhid, which simply means the absolute oneness of God. Now, Tawhid isn't just some academic theological buzzword. It is a deeply logical, beautiful framework that's entirely designed to protect your direct connection with the Creator. It establishes that God is completely unique, all-hearing, and all-powerful, meaning he simply doesn't need assistance to process our requests. Tawhid is really the ultimate spiritual equalizer. Nobody has a VIP pass to God that you don't also have.
So, to protect this direct connection, we run into the concept of qubur, which refers to Islamic teachings regarding physical graves. Now, looking at this from the outside, some of the rules around graveyards in Islam might seem like a list of pretty harsh restrictions, but let's look at this through a different lens. These guidelines aren't about just being rigid for the sake of it. They're actually protective boundaries to preserve Tawhid. They make sure that places of rest remain peaceful places of reflection, rather than slowly evolving into shrines where people might start praying to the deceased instead of the divine.
Because when you visit a resting place, there's a very rational, logical dynamic between the living and the deceased. We, the living, can offer something incredibly valuable. We can actually pray for the peace and forgiveness of the person who passed away. We can even do good deeds on their behalf. But the deceased? They've moved on from this realm. They literally do not have the power to hear or grant requests to the living. The flow of benefit only goes one way, from the living to the dead, not the other way around.
So the absolutely crucial takeaway here is this. When Islamic teachings advise against praying to the deceased, it is totally not out of a lack of respect or love for our ancestors or righteous people. It's actually the exact opposite. We honor the dead by praying for them and letting them rest, all while fiercely protecting God's exclusive right to hear and answer our prayers. It's all about keeping our spiritual compass pointing true north. It's about pure theological consistency.
If that direct connection is broken, it falls into a concept known as Shirk, which means associating partners with Almighty God. Gently speaking, if someone relies on deceased saints, asks them to fix their worldly problems, or offer sacrifices at a shrine, it disrupts that beautiful, direct relationship we've been talking about. It inadvertently takes a human being and places them on a level that belongs only to God. Shirk is prohibited simply because it distracts the human heart from the ultimate, loving source of all solutions. But don't worry, because here is the immensely empowering solution: dua. This translates to direct supplication and personal prayer. Islam entirely empowers you as an individual to just talk to God. You don't need a special building, you don't need a specific intermediary, and you certainly don't need to wait for a holy day. You can ask God for help directly, anytime, anywhere. Whether you're sitting in a quiet room, stuck in traffic in your car, or facing a massive life crisis, God is always, always listening.
Now, while a middleman is never needed, there are some really valid, logical methods you can use to make your prayers feel stronger and more resonant. This practice is called tawassul, meaning drawing closer to the divine. But to be clear, it's not about finding a back door to God. It's actually about elevating your own personal spiritual state when you make your dua, so your heart is just fully, 100% aligned with your request.
The source material actually outlines 3 intellectually honest and direct methods of tawassul to elevate your prayer. First up, invoking God's beautiful attributes. This is like saying, "O merciful one, please have mercy on me." Second, relying on your own sincere good deeds as a kind of bridge. And third, simply asking a living, righteous person, like a really good friend or a parent, to pray for you. The brilliant thing about all three of these is that they keep the focus entirely on God and on practical living reality.
There's actually a fascinating historical anecdote that brings this idea perfectly to life. Picture this. 3 men are seeking shelter in a cave when suddenly a massive rock falls and traps them completely inside. They quickly realize no human being can hear them. So what do? They use tawassul. Each man prays directly to God by recalling a sincere, ethical, good deed he did in the past purely for God's sake. One man talks about how he honored his parents, another about how he resisted a major temptation, and the third about how he went out of his way to pay an employee fairly. And with each prayer, the rock miraculously shifts just a little bit more, until they are finally free. It's such a beautiful illustration of how your own ethical actions are your absolute best bridge to God in times of crisis.
Okay, so now we definitely need to address the elephant in the room. It's a great question and honestly a very common external misunderstanding. If Islam is so incredibly strict about not turning graves into places of worship, why on earth is the Prophet Muhammad, the very founder of the faith, buried inside his famous mosque in Medina? From the outside looking in, that seems like a massive contradiction, right? But let's look at this calmly and academically.
If we look back at the historical timeline, the Prophet passed away in the year 11 after the Hijrah. And here's the key. He was not buried in the mosque. He was actually buried in his own home, specifically in the room of his wife Aisha, which just happened to be situated right next to the mosque. For decades, between the years 17 and 29, the mosque was expanded to fit a growing population. But the leaders specifically expanded it in the opposite direction just to avoid the house. It wasn't until the year 88, which was long after the Prophet's companions had passed away, that massive city expansion basically forced the house to be enveloped by the mosque's outer walls.
So this reveals something absolutely crucial. The Prophet's grave ending up inside the mosque is an architectural exception, born entirely out of spatial necessity. It was absolutely not a theological design meant to create a shrine. In fact, when the ruler at the time ordered this expansion over the house, the early scholars of the city strongly objected to it. It was literally a matter of urban planning overriding the original boundaries, not a sudden change in the religion's core beliefs.
And we know the faith is internally consistent because the Prophet himself made it crystal clear. He explicitly forbade turning his resting place into a shrine. He actually said, "Do not make my grave a place of recurring festivity." He definitely did not want his followers to treat his grave the way past nations treated the graves of their saints. He wanted them to always pray directly to God.
Which brings us to our ultimate takeaway for anyone seeking the truth today. In Islam, no middleman is ever needed. The door to God is just always open. There is an immense, profound comfort in knowing for a fact that you don't need a saint, you don't need a priest, and you don't need a revered ancestor to validate your worth to God. Your voice is enough. Your sincere heart is enough.
So, I want to leave you with this final thought today. Really think about your own connection to the universe, to the divine. How would your spiritual life change? How would your daily anxieties shift if you knew with absolute certainty that the Creator was always listening directly to you? It's quite the empowering thought, isn't it? Thank you so much for hanging out and exploring this fascinating topic with me. Keep asking those great questions, keep seeking, and I will see you in the next explainer.